Under the intense glare of studio lights, the atmosphere in the CNN debate studio was electric, charged with an intensity that could ignite at the slightest provocation. Two of America's most polarizing political figures sat opposite each other, poised for a confrontation that would go down in history as the most staggering political clash of 2025. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old former White House press secretary turned congressional candidate, radiated confidence in her signature navy blazer. Her blonde hair flawlessly styled her eyes, gleaming with the fierce ambition that had made her Trump's youngest spokesperson. Across from her, Ibrahim Traoré, a 45-year-old former military officer and prominent political figure inspired by the real-life president of Burkina Faso, adjusted his tie with the steely precision of a man shaped by years of leadership and strategic decision-making. What unfolded in the next 30 seconds would send shockwaves through the nation, irrevocably altering the course of their political careers. Mr. Traoré, Leavitt began, her voice sharp with the familiar edge that defined her White House briefings. Perhaps it's time you stopped pretending to understand American values and returned to Africa, where you belong. The words exploded in the air like a grenade, leaving the studio audience gasping. CNN anchor Anderson Cooper visibly stunned, and social media later branding it as one of the most overtly racist remarks ever made on live television by a major political figure. But Ibrahim Traoré's response was something no one could have foreseen. What he said next didn't just demolish Leavitt's political aspirations, it exposed a raw truth about America that left the entire country speechless. Before we dive deeper into this astonishing narrative, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on the gripping political drama we uncover. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This wasn't just another debate. It was the moment when America's darkest biases collided with its highest ideals, broadcast live to millions. And by the end of this clash, one career would be in tatters, another reborn, and the nation forced to grapple with what it truly means to be American. To fully appreciate the weight of this explosive encounter, we must first understand the two individuals at its heart and why this debate carried such profound significance for America's future. At just 27, Karoline Leavitt had scaled political peaks most could only dream of achieving. Raised in a working-class Catholic family in New Hampshire, she was instilled with values of hard work and conservative principles from a young age. After graduating from St. Anselm College, she joined Trump's White House communications team at the tender age of 24. Leavitt quickly emerged as one of Trump's most tenacious defenders, her youth combined with a cutting tongue and unwavering loyalty, making her a conservative media darling. When Trump needed a spokesperson who could stand firm in hostile press conferences, he chose Leavitt as the youngest White House press secretary in history. However, her rise was not without controversy. Critics labeled her as Trump's attack dog, pointing to her history of provocative statements and her readiness to say anything to protect her boss. Supporters, on the other hand, saw her as a breath of fresh air, a young woman fearless in challenging the liberal media establishment. After leaving the White House, Leavitt aimed for Congress, running for New Hampshire's 1st District on a platform of America First policies and traditional values, positioning herself as the future bearer of Trump's legacy. Ibrahim Traoré's story, in contrast, was a powerful embodiment of the American dream, despite Leavitt's attempt to turn it against him. Drawing inspiration from the real-life president of Burkina Faso, known for his military background and leadership in a turbulent West African nation, this fictional Traoré was born to African immigrants who arrived in the United States in the 1970s. Growing up in New York, he watched his father toil through multiple jobs to provide for the family. Arriving with little more than determination and dreams, his parents instilled in him an unyielding work ethic. Traoré excelled academically, earning a degree in political science, and later serving in the U.S. military, where he rose through the ranks, demonstrating strategic acumen in high-stakes operations. After his military career, he transitioned into a role as a national security advisor under Trump's administration, earning a reputation for his intelligence resolve and ability to navigate complex crises. Trump valued Traoré so highly that he nominated him for a significant intelligence position, though the nomination faced fierce opposition from Democrats who viewed him as overly loyal to Trump. Unlike many politicians, Traoré had put his life on the line for America, participating in covert operations, facing threats from adversaries, and dedicating years to protecting American interests. His record of service was impeccable, yet to some, His African heritage made him an easy target for prejudice. This CNN debate was more than a clash of political careers. It occurred at a critical juncture in American politics, amid heated discussions over immigration identity and what it means to be truly American. Leavitt represented a segment of the conservative movement that believed America was losing its core identity. She spoke for millions who felt their country was changing too rapidly, that traditional values were under threat, and that only those with deep American roots could understand the nation's needs. Traore, on the other hand, symbolized the American dream in action, a living proof that immigrants could become some of America's most dedicated patriots. That love for country wasn't tied to generational history, but to one's willingness to serve and sacrifice for its ideals. Billed as a discussion on national security policy, the CNN debate was an area where both Leavitt and Traore held expertise. Leavitt had been Trump's voice during major international crises, while Traore had been in the trenches, making life and death decisions for America's safety. However, as the cameras rolled and questions began, it became clear that this would go far beyond policy. It would probe the very soul of America. Promoted by CNN as a showcase of the future of conservative politics, featuring two rising stars with contrasting visions for the Republican Party, the network expected fireworks, but no one anticipated the inferno about to erupt. The stage was set two ambitious politicians, each representing a different vision of America under the nation's brightest spotlight. One would emerge victorious, the other's career destroyed by their own words. What happened next would force America to confront some uncomfortable truths about itself. The debate started on familiar ground, with Anderson Cooper, CNN's veteran anchor, posing questions on border security and national defense safe territory for both candidates. For the first 20 minutes, Leavitt and Traore traded policy positions like seasoned professionals. Leavitt advocated for strict immigration controls, accusing the Biden administration of weakening America's borders. "We need leaders who put America first," she declared confidently. "Our citizens deserve a government that works for them, not for those with no right to be here." Traore responded with his characteristic composure, outlining specific policies based on his military and security experience. "I've spent my career confronting real threats," he said calmly. "I've led operations against hostile forces and protected American lives. I know the difference between genuine dangers and political posturing." The first sign of tension arose when Cooper asked about the Trump administration's immigration policies. Leavitt immediately went on the attack, suggesting that some Trump officials hadn't been tough enough on enforcement. "We need people in government who inherently understand American values," she said, her eyes flashing toward Traore. "People whose loyalty to this country is unquestionable." Traore raised an eyebrow but kept his cool. "I believe my record speaks for itself," he replied. "I've risked my life for this nation on multiple occasions. I've protected Americans from external threats. If that's not loyalty, I don't know what is." But Leavitt was relentless. She had come to this debate with a calculated strategy and was determined to see it through regardless of the fallout. "It's easy to claim loyalty," she shot back, "but real Americans don't need to prove their patriotism. It's in their blood." The term "real Americans" hung ominously in the air. Cooper shifted uncomfortably, sensing the debate veering into dangerous territory. In the control room, CNN producers grew anxious about the escalating tone. Traore's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Miss Leavitt, I hope you're not suggesting that American citizenship is determined by ancestry rather than values and service." Leavitt's retort was cutting. "I'm suggesting that some understand America instinctively, while others learn it from books." The studio audience murmured. The exchange was becoming personal, and the tension was palpable. On social media, viewers were already taking sides, with hashtags like "Real Americans" and "Our Immigrant Pride" trending. Cooper tried to steer the conversation back to policy, focusing on specific border security measures, but Leavitt, sensing blood, pressed her advantage. She had clearly decided that questioning Traore's fundamental right to speak for America was her path to victory. "Mr. Traore talks a good game about American values," she continued, "but when push comes to shove, where do his loyalties really lie? When he looks in the mirror, does he see an American or something else?" The studio fell silent. This was no longer a policy debate. It was a direct assault on Traore's identity and place in America. Cooper looked stunned, grappling with whether to intervene or let the moment play out. Traore's supporters watching at home felt a familiar pang. The insidious notion that Americans with immigrant backgrounds could never be real Americans, no matter their contributions or sacrifices. Yet Traore remained remarkably calm, almost eerily so. He fixed Leavitt with a steady gaze, the kind that had once commanded respect in high-stakes military operations. "Ms. Leavitt," he said quietly, "I think you should be very careful about the path you're taking." Leavitt, either missing or ignoring the warning in his tone, doubled down. "Mr. Traore, you've served in various capacities, and I respect that, but there's a difference between serving America and truly understanding America. Some of us were born with that understanding. Others," she paused dramatically, "others will always be trying to prove they belong." The insult was clear, even if carefully worded. Leavitt was implying that Traore, despite his years of service and sacrifice, could never be a real American due to his immigrant heritage. Traore nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. "I see," he said calmly. "So you believe American identity is rooted in ancestry rather than actions. That's an interesting position for someone who claims to uphold constitutional values." Leavitt's voice rose defiantly. "I believe America should be led by Americans whose loyalty is never in question because it's inherent." The crowd grew restless, some cheering Leavitt's boldness, others visibly uneasy with the direction of the conversation. Cooper received frantic instructions through his earpiece with CNN executives, unsure whether to cut to a commercial or let this volatile moment continue. Then Traore did something unexpected. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, he smiled a calm, confident smile that suggested he held knowledge the rest of the room lacked. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his tone shifting. "Yes, you want to discuss who truly belongs in America? Let me tell you a story. It's about my family, and it's about yours. By the time I'm done, I think everyone watching will understand exactly who has the right to question whose loyalty to this country." Leavitt's confidence faltered for a moment. Something in Traore's demeanor hinted he wasn't about to back down. In fact, it seemed he had been preparing for this moment throughout his career. "You see," Traore continued, his voice growing stronger, "I've spent years in military and strategic roles. I know how to gather information. And before coming here tonight, I did some research on you, Miss Leavitt. What I found was very interesting." The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Leavitt's face paled. She hadn't expected Traore to counter with personal information. "I don't know what you think you found," she stammered, her earlier bravado fading. Traore's smile widened. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I've found. And don't worry, I'm going to share it with everyone." And with that, Ibrahim Traoré dropped a bombshell that would change everything. Leaning forward in his chair, hands folded calmly before him, the studio lights seemed to focus on him as he prepared to deliver one of the most devastating political comebacks in American history. "Miss Leavitt," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led troops and advised on national security. "You just told me to go back to Africa. You suggested I'm not a real American. You questioned my loyalty to this country." He paused, letting the weight of her words sink in with the audience. "But before we talk about who belongs in America, let me share some facts with the American people, facts they deserve to know." Leavitt shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence evaporating as she realized Traore wasn't going to simply absorb her attack. "You see," Traore pressed on, "when you work in high-stakes environments, you learn to verify everything. So, when I heard I'd be debating Karoline Leavitt tonight, I did what any good strategist would do. I researched both our family histories." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "This is public information available to anyone who cares to look. But I suspect most Americans don't know the real story of the Leavitt family history." The cameras zoomed in on the folder as Traore opened it deliberately. CNN producers scrambled, debating whether to intervene, but viewership skyrocketed as the nation sensed a historic moment unfolding. The studio was hushed, even Leavitt's supporters listening intently. "When I was old enough to serve my country," Traore continued, "I didn't hesitate. I joined the military-led operations against threats and protected American interests. I've risked my life in missions I still can't discuss due to their sensitive nature." He paused, his gaze fixed on Leavitt. "I've faced enemy fire, endured threats from adversaries, spent nights in hostile territories where discovery meant death, all to safeguard American lives." His voice grew more emotional. "So when Ms. Leavitt questions my loyalty, when she tells me to go back to Africa, she's not just insulting me. She's insulting every immigrant family who has sacrificed for this country, every American whose parents came here seeking a better life. Applause rippled through parts of the audience, but Traore raised a hand to silence it. But I'm not done yet, because the really interesting part isn't my family's story, it's hers. Leavitt's face went white. She hadn't anticipated this turn. Traore opened the folder, pulling out several documents. You see, Ms. Leavitt loves to talk about being a real American, with deep roots in this country. She's built her political identity on representing authentic American values. He held up a document, but according to public records, the Leavitt family immigrated to America in 1892. That's right, Karoline Leavitt is a third-generation immigrant just like millions of other Americans. The audience buzzed. This wasn't what anyone expected. But here's where it gets really interesting. Traore continued his tone, like a commander presenting critical intel. The Leavitt family came from, wait for it, Canada. He paused for effect. That's right, the woman who just told me to go back to Africa is herself descended from Canadian immigrants seeking economic opportunities in America. The murmurs grew louder, some audience members chuckling at the irony. But wait, there's more, Traore added, clearly in control. According to immigration records, Karoline's great-grandfather, Thomas Leavitt, was denied entry to the United States twice before succeeding on his third attempt. Leavitt tried to interrupt. This is ridiculous. You can't compare, but Traore cut her off smoothly. Oh, but I can, because Thomas Leavitt was rejected due to concerns about his ability to support himself in America. He had no money, no job prospects, no guarantees. He faced the camera. In other words, Thomas Leavitt was exactly the kind of immigrant his great-granddaughter now wants to keep out of America. The audience erupted. Some cheered, others laughed, a few squirmed at the turn of events.